So here we are, unique, useful insight number 5. We prefer to use our heads before we use our hearts to pick colleges. So here's what I mean by that. I recognize and I understand, I see it every day. Picking a college, it's an emotional decision. And that's an understatement. It's an emotional decision for the students, for sure. Definitely an emotional decision for the parents. And our the position that we take is yes, we recognize that it's an emotional decision. But before we make it an emotional decision, before we start looking at the subjective measures of a college, let's start with just raw data first because yeah, if you've made it this far, you'll realize that if you research college planning, you're going to see a lot of opinions out there, okay? Everyone has an opinion. I have an opinion, but we feel that the big tiebreaker is empirical research and data. So what we don't want to do is leave what is potentially a $200,000, $300,000 decision in the hands of a teenager, okay? I think the colleges that teenagers want to go to and the colleges they need to go to, if we're lucky, they're the same college. Sometimes they're not the same college. And that could be very difficult for a parent or a teenager to process. But think about it this way. Do we just buy the car our teenager wants? What would happen if we did? Okay. I think when I was a teenager, I wanted a Corvette. Did I get one? Well, no, because number one, my parents couldn't afford a Corvette. And even though it was the car I wanted, it was not the car I needed. Um, Probably would have made a lot of irresponsible decisions, might have even gotten into a lot of trouble. Think of college along those lines. And I believe the reality for a lot of families is when students start looking at colleges they want, because it's got a football team, it's the one their boyfriend or girlfriend's going to, or it's the one all their friends are going to, you can't afford those colleges. You can't afford, going back to my earlier points, to have your student get finished in 6 instead of 4 years. You can't afford colleges with poor retention rates, which I'll get into in just a second. So what we don't want to do is we definitely don't want to wing it and take any chances. And we recognize that there are a million variables when it comes to picking a college. But the position we take is if we start with data and if we start with just a few core data points, you're going to find that everything else just falls into place. So a great way to review this is how students typically pick colleges and how parents typically pick colleges. They usually want to go where their friends are going. They want to go to a big school. They want to go to the one with their favorite football team. They want what they call the college experience, okay? College just isn't about learning. It's about the experience. Um, they want to be close to home or maybe they want to be far from home. Every student's different. How parents pick colleges, depending how close you are to getting your student to the senior year of high school, I can tell you the prevailing concern is money. Okay, how are we going to afford it? How are we going to pay for it? We want colleges with good academic programs. Sometimes parents say, pick this college. You're going to go there because I went there. Okay, prestige, status, and this one was true for my mom. She definitely wanted me to go to college that was within a 1 or 2 hour drive. So here's our methodology in a nutshell, okay? So this is a flow chart. Don't mean to overcomplicate things. There's a video down here that you can watch that goes in this in a little more detail. But basically, we literally start with all the colleges in the United States. And we want to narrow it down to the colleges that have the students' core majors. What are the 2 majors that will get us to all of our career choices? We want to get into colleges that fit, and we're going to go over this in just a second. Then we look at these major metrics. What's the retention rate? This is the percentage of freshmen that don't drop out at that particular college. I typically like colleges with retention rates of 75% or more. Anything lower than that, then it starts to get iffy. I covered this earlier. We want colleges with great 4-year grad rates. Don't be tricked. Colleges like to quote grad rate. You'll notice that there is not a number in front of that statement. When colleges are giving you grad rate, when they're not saying 4-year rate, they're giving you their 6-year rate. We want to pay attention to colleges that are ultra competitive, that have super low acceptance rates. You may thrive at that college, you may do well at that college, but with low acceptance rates, it just makes getting into those schools really hard. And for families that are price sensitive, which I would imagine is most of you, we want to pay attention to our EFC and what the need met at that college is and what the merit aid profile looks like. So when you start with these broad metrics and you narrow it down, you're going to get very close to finalizing your list of colleges. So I go into this in more depth with how we should start the college search. And another thing that makes us different is getting back to fit, okay? Getting back to the academic fit. Our theory on this is it's really based on how your test score and where it falls in the test score distribution of that college. Typically, you want to be in that upper third, maybe even towards the top 25th percentile. What happens is that from an enrollment management perspective, these are the students that the colleges really covet because colleges are really focused on rankings, okay? And they want to find the students that academically are going to produce a favorable result at that college. Colleges want students that are going to fit academically. So if you look at your distribution and where you fall on that line, your test score, our belief is that it is not an IQ test. It's not going to tell me how smart you are. It's more of an indicator of what your pace is. And when you're in the top 25th percentile at that school, you're operating at the intended pace of that college. Students in that upper quartile should be spending about 36 to 42 hours a week, where college is the equivalent of a full-time job, where you're working during the day, you're off in the evenings, you've got the weekends to recharge your batteries, and you're thriving and growing at that school. If you're on the upper part of the average, but in the top 30, 40th percentile, you're in what we call the yellow zone. And these are colleges you should readily get admitted to. But it could be a mixed bag in merit aid and financial aid. Again, you could certainly thrive in these schools, and we have students apply to schools in this range all the time, but the results get better the closer you are to the green. And of course, you want to avoid schools. Just because you get into a college, just because you get accepted by a college, doesn't mean you're going to thrive at that college. And at 60 to 65 hours a week, just to get your work done, that really puts you on pace to a delayed graduation of about 6 or maybe even 7 years. So what we do is we start with test score. Even a practice test score can give us an early start, and we really want to pay attention to our distribution of the scores of that particular school. So that's really one of the first big steps we take when filtering colleges. Then we look at other core metrics. And again, this is a great way to really filter out some of the emotional aspects of what it means to go to a college. And it really cuts down through all the noise, okay? So that's our unique insight. Let's start with our heads first. Then we can start with our hearts, okay? College is an emotional decision, but we've taken a very empirical and research-based approach to selecting schools. And I'll admit, data isn't the end-all be-all, but it is where we should start the search.